She mentioned I was her teacher. You know what her dissertation is about? It's a qualitative study about what are the characteristics of innovative teachers. Right? That is innovation that started 10 years ago. Yes, when she was in kindergarten. Yeah, when I heard what Elliot is going to say, I said, oh, this is right what we want in Hong Kong. We have a small group of people who, some of us actually started the last round of reform in 1999. And then we found in 2014 that maybe we should do something to tell the society what happened, And then we found that perhaps it's not so, it's not adequate to look backward, but have to look forward. And the net result of that is we come up with what we call Education 2.1. And I'll not go on with that. But one of our proposals which came true is to set up a big education platform. And the organizers are actually here. We use big, right? We all think big. Earlier, that is a common ground. And, but before, that was the notion of one of our three kind of mottos. One is education for all, that everybody is equity. Second is all-round education, and that is somehow related. That is, education is not only about, it's about experiences, which I'll explain later. But the third one is all for education. That is, education should not be restricted to schools and the teachers. It's the whole society. And that apparently echoes what Elliot said very much. And that was based on our study before we launched that at all. In 2015, we did a study on a sample of 228 schools, which is about 1/5 of the total population, and to see how many projects they have with organizations outside education. And the result was very encouraging. We found that of all the primary and secondary schools, for each school, there's an average of 9.8 projects, almost 10 projects that are partnership with somebody outside the school. And they're not doing curriculum matters. It's not inviting them to teach English in schools or for students to do curriculum-related matters. It's fundamentally doing things that are not in schools as an early experience, early engagement in experiences in society. And I suppose that was 4 years or 5 years ago. 4 years ago, it must be, the number must have increased. The organizations involved in those days at that small sample is 2003. And I think this is much more now. So the first thing is we really have to see what has happened already. It's not due to government policy. There's no government funding. And there is no particular advocates at that time, but it happens. So it was really a trend that is appreciated by society, not only by educators, but by people outside education, outside schools, who think this is essential for our children. And they all feel very happy, with little monetary reward, with no expected kind of a physical incentive. So that is only my preface. What I'm going to say is likely to take 3 hours, but no, I'm kidding. I'll squeeze everything into about 20, 15 minutes. My beliefs are two, and this has driven me in the past 20 years. The ultimate aim of education is to prepare young people for the future. I presume you agree. The second is the core business of education is learning. Now, I use the word business, a little bit too business, but I think it's the core activity, the core attention should be learning. And I try to work in these two directions. Before we started the education reform, my mind is always on education, about schools, curriculum, teachers, parents, and so on and so forth. But then because of the education reform, I began to think that if we are going to prepare our young people for the future, what is future? How is future different from what we have now? And then I discovered that first, things that will happen in 16 years' time when our primary one kids graduate from university, it will be a totally different society. Because at that time, in 1990, 2000, what we had at that point was what we never had expected 16 years before. Society is changing very, very quickly, very, very large extent, and to the extent that we could not recognize it. And to put it simple, I think how do we know what will happen in the future is rather impossible, but I can only say future is now. It's already happening. That is macro. And then because of that, I found that our system is fundamentally about channeling students into a narrow path with a target of a job. Governments invest in education because of GDP growth, because of international global competitiveness. And why do you have students do education? A lot of government policy will still say is employability. Or in China, it's about 人才, about talents. It's an economic discourse. But now, I'm going to explain that this is no longer possible. It's no longer possible. Channeling them into a narrow target is actually depriving them of real opportunities. And therefore, I turn to learning rather than credentials. Now, I've already taken too much of our time, so I'll try to fast forward. This is John, my friend, who graduated in electrical engineering in my own university. He was appointed to the Department of Electrical Engineering in government, promoted to a very senior position. You see his signature everywhere. And then he chose to retire 55. Now he's enjoying his retirement, doing erhu and doing painting and so on and so forth. This is typical of 20th century. However, and this is a kind of a one credential, one job, one occupation, one organization. Right? However, this is 1971. Right? This is a typical career path in the industrial era. Right? In Chinese, it's even more dramatic. You don't understand Chinese, but it's 一技傍身, 一子文凭, 一帆风顺, 一劳永逸, 从一而终. Right? Every kind of idiomatic expression with one. But this is no longer true. And I try to understand. Society has changed, in particular career paths. I start with career paths, although society is not only about career paths. I give you a few slides on statistics. This is what the mismatch in my own university, which is perhaps even less than typical. Medicine is the only where you have a little mismatch because perhaps the income incentive is so great. Law, 15 to 20%. In US, law school is a graduate school, is by choice. It's even bigger. Sometimes it's more than 50% mismatch. They don't take up law as their profession. Engineering, to my surprise, 35%. And otherwise, it's all the same. Biology, psychology, history, they all do more or less the same thing. The second, this is Imperial College UK. I got this about 8 years ago. Year one, the question is, do you want to be an engineer? Year one, 81% said yes. The dean was very furious. The other 19%, why are you here? Right? He said, I've spent all my effort to tell them how interesting, how exciting is engineering. But year four, only 44%. So he was totally upset. the changes, now this is Australia, an institute in Melbourne, 2016, 2 years ago. They reckoned that for an individual, average individual, he or she will take up 15 jobs in his or her lifetime. That reminds me, 10 years before that, 2006 in UK, there's another statistics that estimated that average individual would take up 13 jobs. I couldn't believe it at the time. I turned to the Department of Labor, US, 10.6 jobs. Right? And before that, 2002, 4.3 occupations. These are hard statistics. Unfortunately, we don't have that in Hong Kong, but it's quite common. Right? Once there was a crew doing an interview with me, and then I said something like this, and I said, this is my 6th job. This is my 5th job. They are all under 30. Right? It's a common phenomenon. So the mismatch is only about the first job. Even the first job is a match. You don't know where they go. So now it's about study mismatch, about frequent changes, occupations, but many of them don't want to have a job. Right? Don't want to have a job. Don't want to be appointed. They want to be on their own. Startups and freelancers serving many, many clients at one time. Multiple portfolios doing many, many different types of jobs at one time. Intermittent work, gain salaries for 2 years, go to travel, Patagonia. Right? Another 2 years, Baltics. Right? This is what they do. And when I said this, the older people began to worry. Are you sure you want to quit such a good job? What are you thinking about your retirement? But all the young people say, I admire this. I want to be like that. Right? It's a different way of thinking. Unemployment, intermittent unemployment, or intentional unemployment. That is, they don't want to work at all. I can tell you a small story. Once I was in a gathering in Paris, and the leading researcher in the World Bank said, when you said these people who who stay in the families and at home and don't want to work, I have one, my son, is like this. And immediately another senior person, OECD, said, embarrassingly, my son is also like this. Right? But they all refer to sons, though. But there are fewer jobs around. There's a small literature in the US. The growth of jobs is slower than the growth of population. So full employment is beginning to be suspicious. And there are new occupations. You don't know what they are, right? And so on. Now, I want to understand why. One explanation is because these young people are corrupt, right? They don't have work ethics, right? But the other explanation perhaps is that we don't know the reality. We educators are a little bit backward. We live in the 20th century. They are in the 21st century. So I try to explain. Now, I'm consolidating what will be an hour into 2 minutes. The production for needs no longer is production to create desire. Right? I won't ask the same question because many of you have heard. I normally ask the audience how many pairs of shoes you have at home. And they all smile to themselves. Right? Do you need so many pairs of shoes? Are the shoes all the same? No. No. So we have gone past the era where you produce for needs. You may say, no, it's not oversupply. You still have hungry people in Africa, but producers don't look at that as a market. The market is on where you have money, where governments print their notes, and so on and so forth. And mass production, therefore, is a bygone issue. This is where industrial society started. Right? Everybody does a small bit of the action, you combine into a sophisticated product, and then mass produce. And therefore, you need mass of workers with work lines, production lines, and then you have supervisors, and the supervisors of supervisors, and so on. So pyramids. But now, it is basically about less of more, less quantity, more variety. It's about individualized production, about customized service. It's about tailor-made services, and so on and so forth. Right? And so the notion of a big company, big organization for division of labor, for departments and layers, is no longer the trend. I can give you a very simple example. I just mentioned this to some of our participants here who are from Shanghai. Maxim. You know Maxim's in Hong Kong, right? It used to be a Cantonese restaurant, which is very famous because of its menu, decoration, service styles. How many shops are there, restaurants are there in Maxim in Hong Kong? Over 600, right? My mother lived in Tai Kuxing. There are 4 restaurants surrounding the open area. Cantonese, Pekingese, Shanghainese, and Sichuan. They are all Maxims, but they are not all. They're called not one of them. None of them are called Maxims. So you walk into a restaurant in Central, 60% of the time you are in the Maxims, right? Less of more. Across the road from the Hong Kong University, there's a PhD shop. Selling PhD? No, it's Pizza Hut delivery. Right? You try to change the names to okay. And then large entrepreneurs have gone to small, flat, loose, and fragile one-stop shops, one-stop units. Even in large organizations like investment banks, they work in small units. Task force, deal teams, program teams, project teams, one team for one client. It's not like in the old organization. Each client has to go through all the departments, and each department will serve all the clients. Right? It's a totally different setup. Now, because of that, think of an organization. They're very small. They're fragile. You ask an employer, what kind of manpower do you want? The best he can tell you is what he wants now. What do you want 2 years from now? That was how we did manpower forecasting in the 1970s. Most likely they will tell you, I really don't know. 5 years' time, I even don't know whether my company will still exist. I may change to something new. Right? If this is the case, organizational commitment, employers to employees is very much weakened. Very much weakened. Commitment, security, protection is not easy because even the organization itself is fragile. And how do you expect the employees to be loyal to the organizations? How do you expect them to secure protection from the organization? How can you expect the young people to have long-term expectation of long-term employment? So if that is the case, then it's easy to understand why young people are getting into totally different career paths. Now, I'm a little bit long, so I'll shorten the next part. But it's a change that is fundamental, comprehensive, and irreversible. Right? It's a fundamental change not because of a trend, not because of a kind of a fashion. It's something that's fundamentally changed because we look for quality of life, we look for variety, and everything happens. Volatile, uncertain, this is quite common in the literature, the VUCA society. They have different views about jobs, careers, success, satisfaction, happiness. It is a case, but most countries are still thinking of manpower, about jobs. But in the workplace, you will see these are happening, which requires much more than knowledge and skills. And that is perhaps what Elliot was also pointing to. But we pay much less attention. In Hong Kong schools, although we also have the so-called moral education or the affective domains of learning, which is quite common in Chinese communities. However, eventually you have to pass examinations, you have to get scores, and people take scores for almost everything which is indispensable. Most of these are not learned through the formal curriculum, and is education preparing our young people for a workplace future. And there comes experience. And I'll explain quickly my understanding. I'll forgo this. This is MIT. The skills that they use more or less learned from universities. I'll skip that. This is something due to one of our Haley Khan. She did a study on 5 cases from Morgan Stanley, MTR, underground station, Giordano, and to a single freelancer. She found that the salary differential for the same university, same degree, and same occupation, so same paper, same branding, and same occupation, the salary could be very different. That means employers are looking for something well beyond the diploma, well beyond the credentials. So what are they? What are they? These are things that are to me. Future is not only about work, it's not only about manpower, only resources. My mom is 99. I hardly think she is part of the human resources, but she has to learn. She has to learn a lot. Learning is a human instinct, I think you agree, but education is not. Education is a system of learning designed by human beings for human beings. And therefore, education is an institution influenced by economic, political, social, cultural, spiritual underpinning of the time. That means the design could be obsolete. I think we are facing that. We are facing that. The real change are facing people have to learn how to learn, and hence learning to learn, and therefore the science of learning. I'll go through very quickly in a nutshell. My understanding of science of learning, which is emerging, I've reckoned that there are over 2,000 researchers in the United States, which is by far the largest group, very much led by NSF, National Science Foundation, who work on science of learning. In Europe, a few hundreds. In Asia, a few dozens. And we have to, the fundamental thing is human brains are plastic, but human activities shape human brains. Human brains are not shaped by milk powder as advertised in TV, right? Milk powder will make you strong, like physically strong, but doesn't mean you become an athlete. Right? Knowledge and skills is due to experience, not due to milk powder. I consolidate into 5 principles. 1, learning is meaning making. It's making meaning of what you see. Meaning, newborn child can see everything, can hear everything, but no meaning. It's through activities the child began to understand this is human voice, this is mother's face, and so on and so forth. Therefore, it's knowledge construction due to the individual minds. Therefore, it's not poured into the brain, individual brains. The second, so we need them to be active learners, and we have to give them, of course we have to motivate them, but also we have to give them choice, which is already not very usual in this part of the world, but we have to give them space for them to develop their own learning, which is almost non-existent. So I'll go through quickly. The principle 2 is learning is a matter of experience, and there comes all these activities. Practice and understanding are intertwined. We used to think that schools for understanding, for theories, don't do anything yet. And then afterwards, you go to society and practice. Even in science, I was a graduate of mathematics and physics. You do the theory first, and then you go to the laboratory. Right? This is a logical sequence, but it's against the learning process. People don't learn like this. And we talk about power of context. Things are learned much more effectively when it is in context, when it's in application, when you're really using it. What is happening now is we have society which is very diverse. We have individuals who are also very diverse, but in between them is only a very narrow bridge, education. And education is already too respectful a word. It means a few subjects, examining scores. Right? And they have to cross this in order to get into society. Now we have the expanded learning experience in schools, and then we have to add other learning experiences. And therefore, learning by doing, broadening experiences, experiential learning, early experience in real society, and the last one is exactly what we meant by involving society. There are ample resources in society that are not used for learning. Right? We pretend that you are about future, about jobs. We schools are doing learning. Learning is holistic, implicit learning. They learn when they do it. Right? It's not because you tell them, because they've done it. And it's social condition. It's by group. Right? And the last one is about testing. Because in this part of the world, examination is the common enemy to Japan, Korea, Chinese communities, and even Vietnam. All these, I call them the chopstick cultures. Right? The common enemy is examination because of this ancient civil examination that started in the year 603. The test of learning is understanding, and the test of understanding is in application. And therefore, assessment should be what one can do rather than what one knows. But over the globe, the largest percentage of testing is about what they know. But you go to the employer, they will say, I don't mind what you've learned. I really want to know what you can do. Right? This is the reality. And therefore, assessment should contain elements of creation, application, integration, collaboration. Right? This is not what we do for traditional subjects. Right? And therefore, in the universities, the learning commons are replacing the libraries. You see groups and students sitting together to do projects, collaboration, and try to create something, integrated, something, okay. Learning is not about knowledge and skill. This is what we advocated. It should be about capability, which is knowledge and skills, and which is very much done by curriculum. Also attributes about dealing with people, dealing with work, and so on and so forth. You have to come from experience. But even if you have very good capability and attribute, you could be a bad guy. You could be a bad guy. So you have to have values. But where do values come from? Enculturation. Family influence, peer influence, teacher's role model, school styles, how you handle. Yes, thank you. And, but unfortunately, this is very idealistic. Nowadays, very much value systems, knowledge are shaped by the media. And we know very little about how people learn from media. And we have, this is left for our, yes. Therefore, big education, as I mentioned, and I will not repeat. This is our kind of motto. There's no limit to education innovation, no limit. Right? Like in the market, they say customers don't know what they want. Right? But then, there's always a reason and an idea, for a reason. Right? For a reason. This is the temple in Hong Kong, Sishan Monastery. It's a very modern monastery with no worshipping, but basically it's a learning institution, Buddhist. In the introduction, there are two phrases that inspired me. It said, 一念动，一元生. When you have a new idea, you will come to a new horizon. Ideas are important, and that is where innovation comes. Thank you very much.